Imagine you're the only one left in your family. For some reason, everyone in your family has died in strange and unusual ways. That can't be called natural. They were cruel and seemingly paranormal, as if there's a curse hanging over your family. And then you decide to go to the very house where it all happened, taking with you the diary you've kept since early childhood. And we arrive at our destination. Behind us stands a bent iron gate. Someone has installed a chain link fence. But it seems I wasn't the first to climb over it. That is, the area was closed off, meaning no one currently lives here. What we see here is our childhood home. The first thing you feel when you arrive here is silence. There's no familiar exposition, no grandiose opening credits, there's simply a road, a dense forest, our diary, and the thoughts of the main character, Edith. It's worth noting that until the very end, a subtle twist awaits you, that only the most observant among you will catch. So pay close attention. Approach the house, we begin to realize that the strangeness began even when the first member of the household built it. It seemed to have been cobbled together from various pieces, each new floor added without a plan, as if someone was literally trying to escape their fate. Ironic. A little further on, we discover the kitchen. Here, for the first time, we get a glimpse of our family's daily life. Dishes, books, tin cans, all of this, piece by piece, reveals the history of the family members, each with different circumstances. For example, the large number of tin cans is a consequence of the fact that Louis, the protagonist's brother, worked in a fish factory, from which he constantly took home some of the produce. The table was in the same disarray as Edith. At first, the game seems like a cute walking simulator, allowing us to glimpse the daily life of a happy family who once lived in this house. However, if you look closer, you'll notice unusual details that suggest not all was rosy. Near the entrance stands a foam-covered door, leading to some room, boxes filled with pink stuffing, the story of which will be revealed later, and even the fact that the doors in this house are locked. As you climb to the second floor, you likely didn't notice it, but the wooden railing in front of you appears to have been hastily repaired. This means that at some point, someone must have fallen from here. It's worth noting that the house is scattered with numerous secret passages, which we'll have to navigate to move around it. The first of these we encounter is in the blue room on the second floor, and despite its seemingly ordinary appearance, we discover a strange book here, locked with a padlock. By a lucky chance, we have the key. That opens it, given to us by our mother. We open it and find ourselves in a passageway between rooms. Here, I advise you to pay attention to the details you see around you. For example, there's a small drawing that, as the heroine says, was drawn by Milton. This character will also be needed later in the story. We open the door in front and find ourselves in a room filled with pink toys, the hamster she was caring for. And here we also find her diary. Opening it, we are immersed in her story, after which the dark side of our family becomes clear. Here she writes that she will soon be gone, but she wants to tell someone what will happen. It all started when her mother sent her to bed without dinner. She woke up very hungry and began looking for something to eat. First, she went to her hamster's cage and ate a piece of carrot that was lying inside. Then she went to the bathroom, where she decided to eat some toothpaste. Then she went and ate a plastic rowan berry that was lying on her windowsill. And then she heard a chirping sound. It was a bird outside the window. She reached out to catch it and opened it. Okay, I was kidding. In fact, she turned into a cat. Yes, that's exactly what she wrote about in her diary. It's worth remembering that this is just a little girl. The next part of the story is her interpretation of the events that happened to her. Then she is shown as a cat hunting for a bird, jumping over beams and branches, and eventually catching it. She is shown becoming an owl, already flying across a field, looking for food that can be found, and she finds it. Specifically hares. She's shown as a prisoner, first falling onto a slope, sliding down it, and then hunting seals in the water. She's shown emerging to the surface, now in the form of some kind of monster, hunting the people working on the ship. Well, at the very end, this monster emerges from the toilet, crawls into the girl's room, and crawls right under her bed. And when she crawls under, she becomes herself again. She ends her story by saying that the monster is apparently waiting for her to fall asleep, and we both know she'll be delicious. Sweet story, right? Only there's a catch. This girl died of starvation. Story. The story you heard was just a fantasy, dreamed up by a child's imagination, but apparently her mother really did lock her in a room for long periods without food. As a result, the girl began to develop various skin rashes, which you could see while we were playing as her. Apparently, this was a story about how a child, left unattended, can retreat into their own worlds forever. Incidentally, right after this, Edith opens the family tree book and sketches Molly's photo. This will happen with everyone whose stories we've learned or read. And here you can also see the main character's entire mouth, which is represented as a tree. It's worth noting that each member of the family possessed strange traits, atypical of the average person. That same Molly, whose story we just heard, has a cut-up starfish, some kind of deer skull, and even dried scorpions in jars in her room. For a 10-year-old girl, her passion for biology is quite unusual. What can we say if, a little later, walking along the outside of the building and entering the next room, we learned that 100 years ago, the head of the family decided to pull off a brilliant plan and float the entire house on a raft to another continent. Needless to say, this idea ended badly, sending both the entire house and Odin himself to the bottom of the sea? So, the deaths of family members, who were our relatives, were accompanied by crazy ideas or deviations of varying degrees. For example, upon leaving this room, we surprisingly find ourselves in a bathroom, upholstered entirely in pink. The floors, the sinks, even the seats. The toilet will be covered in soft pink fabric. It would seem like a common whim of the building's residents, but behind it lies an equally terrifying story, which we learn when we find a note in the attic, lying in a child's crib. There's already a guess as to what happened here. Briefly, we see the story of Gregory, who was 1 year old at the time, sitting in the bathtub playing with toys, lost in his own world. At one point, his mother should have pulled us out, but she gets distracted by her phone and leaves. At that moment, Gregory is left alone. And all we see is a waltz of beach toys, rubber whales falling from shelves, and, finally, one of the toys accidentally turns on the water faucet. And we begin to leave, accompanied by that same cheerful toy orchestra. This is a creepy story wrapped in a typical child's fantasy. And if Molly's death seemed veiledly psychedelic to you, then what about the other kid standing nearby? more and more. Until he finally started making a son. And it seemed like nothing could go wrong. The boy wasn't afraid of death. He believed he could fly, and in the end, he did. Even at the cost of his life. There are plenty of stories like this in the game. Someone died from spending their entire life in a bunker, then accidentally ending up on railroad tracks and getting hit by a train. Someone died from a botched photo shoot with a deer, which, before dying, decided to make a fuss and knock the person off a cliff. That was Sam, by the way, and a bunch of other stories, each of which, in one way or another, tells of a cruel, yet inevitable death, even going so far as to include beheadings. But I won't show you that one, only in the Telegram channel. One way or another, we're still recording them in our notebook, which is gradually reaching its logical conclusion. The most interesting thing is that some family members' rooms are truly large structures. For example, Milton, who's standing next to us in the book, turns out to have had his own castle. Milton was a gifted child who loved to draw, and this becomes evident when we venture inside his fort, where sketches, drawings, pictures, and other manifestations of creative genius can be seen everywhere. Even though, incidentally, he was only 10 years old. Milton's story is remarkable in that nothing is known about his death. One day, he simply vanished, and no one knows where exactly. In the notebook we see a story of Milton drawing a door with a handle on a canvas, then simply walking through it, and then vanishing. Where he went and what happened to him remains a mystery, but we include a sketch in the notebook. On the last evening, to whom we. This is the very final twist. The mother was the main paranoid, who was afraid of the house and tried with all her might to escape from it. So at the end we are shown how the mother comes into the room of 4-year-old Edith, begins to tear the diary out of her hands. Due to intense pressure, does not twist. They still take her away, leaving the last tenant of the house in the house. About Grandma Eddy, she is the only one who lived to the age of 93 and who was not touched by the curse. But the next morning, when the car came for her, she passed away, as if death came for her at the moment. When the meaning of her life was over. When those for whom she lived decided to leave her, later they with. And, despite the fact that she got better intermittently, in the end, she was gone. And after all this, Edith was left alone, the last of her family. Before we came into the world, I wrote this diary for you. But now I hope you'll never see it. I just want to see you and tell you all these stories in person. This is where our story begins. And at the end, the game reveals its cards. We played not as Edith, but as her child. Edith died in childbirth at the age of 17, leaving behind only a small diary, in which she wrote down all the stories of her family. and then passed it on to her son, whom we've been playing as all this time. And you know, after completing the game, it feels a little different. At first, everything smacks of mysticism, mystery, and a certain suspense. But after playing it, you feel like a fairy tale, where each character has their own story. Yes, maybe not as rosy as you'd like, but still. A story. This is where the question arises. Was there really some kind of curse on the Finches? Was death really stalking the family members and arranging everything to take them with it? And frankly, I don't think so. The deaths were indeed strange, but one way or another, they were tied to human carelessness, grief, or even just plain stupidity. No one in their right mind would transport an entire house on a raft hoping everything would go well, no one would leave there. One alone in the bathroom or deprive their daughter of food for a long time as punishment. Each of these stories is filled with examples of vices that the family members, for some reason, ignored. No one wanted to correct anything. And ultimately, this is what led each of them to a tragic end. Well, that's all my content for today. Don't dwell on failures, keep breathing deeply, and remember that bad days don't reflect who you really are. Bye.